Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Steinmach, and I'm glad to present for you the new episode of our daily wrap-up series. On February the 14th, the 9th meeting of NATO defense ministers is held in Brussels. After the transfer of tanks, the main topic are modern aircraft. Ukrainian authorities continue peddling the question on supplying Ukraine with NATO-made combat fighters, mainly the F-16 fighter jet. This is especially important because the American fighters were actually developed to counter the Soviet air defenses, which became the basis of the Russian anti-air troops. NATO Secretary General also mentions the issue of the planes.
Yes, the type of support has evolved, and that's part of the ongoing consultations among allies within NATO, within the Ukraine support group. And it will continue because we need to ensure that Ukraine gets the weapons it needs to be able to retake territory, liberate the lands, and win this war and prevail as a sovereign independent nation.
At the same time, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin listened to the countries that have started preparations for the transfer of Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine or have given a corresponding commitment. Before the start of the meeting of the contact group on defense of Ukraine, Austin said Germany, Poland, Canada, Portugal, Spain, Norway, Denmark and the Netherlands are working together on the transfer of Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine. He also reminded that the USA, the Czech Republic and the Netherlands are jointly transferring more than 90 T-72 tanks in addition to Poland's decision to provide its T-72s. And Britain hands over a company of Challenger main battle tanks and, together with several countries, is looking for sources to supply Ukraine with additional ammunition.
Instead of putting red lines, I think we have to see what is needed. Military experts said that in a war like this one, a combination of several types of weapon is needed. You need tanks, you need artillery, but you also need fighters jets to protect the airspace and to reach targets that are out of range for the artillery. Christoph Heusgen, chairman of the Munich Security Conference.
Let me remind you, the Munich conference will start already this Friday, and unlike the Ramstein meeting, there will be discussions about the security of the entire planet with the representatives of almost all countries. One of its main topics will be an analysis of the situation a year after the start of full-scale Russian aggression against Ukraine. However, they will discuss it without Russia, because what can be said to them? In total, about 150 politicians from around the world will participate in the Munich Security Conference. The Russian authorities are preparing to start a new wave of mobilization, said Vadim Skibitsky, a representative of the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, in an interview with the Wall Street Journal. Let me remind you that officially the first wave has not yet ended. However, according to intelligence information, gradual mobilization continues. However, the number of people currently needed by the Russians is so large that most likely a new wave will have to be announced. However, according to Skibitsky, if Russia goes ahead with a new round of mobilization, it will suffer from the same problems that the previous wave revealed, including a lack of modern equipment in good working order and a sufficient number of combat-ready officers, training a huge influx of untrained people.
Everything is ready. The personnel is in place. The lists are ready. The people tasked with carrying our requirement and training are on standby. They are preparing for a second wave of mobilization, but our assessment is that they'll hold off because they haven't overcome all the difficulties they experienced during the first wave. They were not ready for such large-scale mobilization at the time, and they are not now. Vadim Skibitsky, the deputy head of Ukraine's military intelligence, in an interview with Wall Street Journal.
Let me remind you that Vladimir Putin announced the previous partial mobilization on September 21, 2022. Then 300,000 men were called up, although according to Ukrainian intelligence, it could be as much as 500,000. According to the president of Russia, citizens who are in the reserve were mobilized for military service, and priority should be given of those who has combat experience. In addition, before being sent to the front line, the mobilized had to undergo appropriate training. However, just a week after the start of mobilization, Russians began to receive reports of the deaths of Russian soldiers. I would like to note that according to the calculations of the Russian BBC service, 60% of Russian mobilized soldiers whose deaths were confirmed died before January the 1st. It is increasing that at least 49 mobilized people died on the territory of Russia, being in collection places or in military troops. Most often, the cause of death was health problems or delayed provision of medical care. That is, the Russians took people into the army who already had significant health problems in the barracks. In general, experts note that the Russian army was not ready to accept, place and train such a mass of people. The mobilized lacked normal uniforms and living quarters. Because of this, they often spent the night in poorly equipped tent cities and fell ill. The educational base is also not designed for the simultaneous training of such a mass of mobilized. Neither equipment nor people were enough. As a result, discipline fell. Conflicts began, both with the supervisors and within the teams themselves. And this led to new problems. For example, there is still no clarity on what happened on October 15th at the training ground in the Belgorod region. Then one of the soldiers who had recently arrived at the unit opened fire on his comrades during training.
A large percentage of interceptions that we record, especially from the partially mobilized ones, is information about the desire to leave the front, about the readiness of organized groups or to make such decision on their own. Including we are talking about crossbows and corruption in order to avoid falling into this meat grinder into which Putin throws them. According to records, every fourth partially mobilized either thinks or is going or made such attempts.
I will note that since December, the number of Russian casualties has only been increasing. In January, an average of 800 people were killed every day in the battles for Bakhmut, Soledar, Vuhledar and Avdiivka. Russia continues to use the tactics of the First World War to seize territory and expense of number of soldiers, regardless of losses. But nobody can ignore the losses. That's why we expect a new wave of mobilization in Russia. We hope the last one, after which ordinary Russians will understand that this war is pointless and there is no reason in dying for some whims of the Tsar president, and will eventually force the authorities to stop the bloodshed. Russia is dying, and the issue is not only that almost 140,000 soldiers were killed in Ukraine due to Putin's short-sighted decision, and the population will decrease by 500,000 people, which is almost 0.5% in 2022, according to the country's population growth data. These are official Russian statistics. The main reason for the reduction of the population in Russia is the fall in the birth rate, which in relative terms became minimal since 2001. A special role in this is played by the drop in real incomes of the population, as well as the general situation of uncertainty and anxiety due to the war against Ukraine, which started a year ago. Mortality is increasing in Russia, but Putin issued a decree that the death rate should decrease in Russia. That is, the presidential decree is not being implemented regarding the increase in life expectancy and the decrease in mortality. And do you know why? To reduce mortality, first of all, it is necessary to increase people's incomes, and they are decreasing in the country. Well, of course, it is much easier to spend money on war and propaganda than on the population wealth of your country.
Путин разменивает будущее.
Putin trades the future for the present, and he does it all the time. It deprives the country of any prospect, investment, technological and cultural. And in fact, it deprives the Russian Federation of the future altogether. I am sure that Russia, as a state of the future, has no future. It will have to be completely dissolved and rebuilt.
Although the war increased the population of Russia, according to the UN, almost 1 million people left the occupied territories of Ukraine to other regions of the aggressor country. And there is still forced removal, especially of small children, the most important in terms of human capital. But on the other hand, how many Russians have already left Russia because of the war, persecution and possible mobilization? And this is precisely the most active population, which here and now could help develop the country, but they decided that it is better to develop other countries than to die or sit in prison in their own. And in order for the number of people to be greater, they have to live longer. And for this, it is necessary to increase the availability of free medical care. And Russia had and still has the largest item in the budget, the military-industrial complex. Who needs this medicine, education and science, culture, if they cannot be used in hybrid war and expansion? Who needs this improvement of life in the regions when you can simply tell on TV that life is improving and the fact that you do not feel it is because you are a little far from the Kremlin and you have to wait for the golden rivers to reach your settlement. In the meantime, live in your huts looking for what you can afford to live until the next pension or social benefit, or in the best case, a salary. Now money is needed for the military because they protect the country. Just why they are defending on someone else's territory and defending in such a way that the territory of Russia is increasing. This will not be explained on TV, but they will explain that without Russia's war against Ukraine, NATO would have attacked Russia. But NATO is a defensive alliance, not an offensive one. Russia is an aggressor country, no matter what sorts people from the Kremlin try to impose.
Both Kremlin and non-Kremlin sociologists record a significant decline in trust in official sources of information. At least 20% of people have reduced their trust in television. Actually, it's understandable, because you can deceive the people once. You can deceive some people an infinite number of times, but if you constantly deceive your people, then they stop believing in you.
And you know, it is faith that increases the birth rate in any country. Only faith is not one's power, but in the well-being of your children, because only a person who is confident in the future will give birth to their children. After all, giving birth just for the sake of giving birth is no longer valid in the modern world. And one more interesting fact: more than 5,000 Russian pregnant women have arrived in Argentina in recent months. Do you know why? Because Russian women want their children to have an Argentine passport, not a Russian one. And by the way, it would be useful for the people of Russia to find out where the children of people who make decisions in the Kremlin currently live. All in Western countries. This is how even the Russian authorities believe in the Russian future. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for future videos. Subscribe to our channel and goodbye.